Hello, and welcome to all the truth seekers that have joined us today from around the world. I'm glad that you've decided to join our online community. For the next hour, GMDC will help you uncover new ideas that will push your thinking inside and outside of your business. My name is Mark McKelsey, and I lead the people and the projects that bring you insights, shopper trends, and next practices from Global Market Development Center. This Infocast will make your lunch hour profitable by demonstrating just how the curiosity and the power of the consumer must be at the center of your strategy. In other words, the way you've done things in the past is not the way your future success will happen. Retailers and brands, more than ever, must be adaptive and in constant flux in order to connect with evolving populations. So how you respond to this session today is important. Without further ado, let's jump into it. I'm coming to you live from Colorado Springs and have Julia Wilson from Nielsen joining me from her New York office. Today's Infocast will help you understand the importance of a sustainable product that has successfully integrated environmental, economic, and social issues into its brand. And you may be surprised to know that only 1/3 of these claims appear to be proven by a consistent definition. As many brands throw the buzzword sustainability around to their customers and print this word on their packaging, only activists and other companies who are deep in the sanctity of this development process from end to end truly know what it takes to be true to the word. You'll be interested to know that in a recent study published in Forbes, that 90% of CEOs say that sustainability is a fundamental strategy for them. For some companies who take this initiative seriously, new jobs are even created focused on this trend, and some large companies even have a chief sustainability officer. At the same time, companies definitely need to live up to this trend because it's more of a trend. In fact, many know it's a way of life, a new way of life. In the same study I mentioned, 88% of students say that environmental and social issues must be a priority for businesses in the future. As these students become consumers and begin to enter the workforce and establish families, it's clear that new generations are more risk averse than ever before. So that means spending happens more carefully and thoughtfully, and people will favor one product over another for very different reasons than what we see today. For example, consumers of the future will look to brands to be more responsible to the earth, and in doing so may pay less attention to the personal benefits that the product has to themselves, although certainly both will still be important. That said, the playing field is leveling. Many big brands are taking charge and revamping their manufacturing processes, but at the same time, many small brands who have launched recently and have already taken a sustainable approach from their foundation can certainly have the edge in the stores in regards to perception and trust when their story is crisp and simple. Some of what you'll hear today from Julie will be about how 66% of consumers are willing to pay more for an item that has valid sustainability attributes, and 81% of millennials expect companies to declare the sustainability procedures to the open public. So Julia, would you help our viewers know a little bit more what they can expect to learn today?
Sure, I'm excited to be here. I also want to talk about what sustainability means for your brand growth and success, and how companies can use sustainability as a new way to win, and arm you with some of the tips and tricks that you can use in your companies to really make this an authentic part of your strategy.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Before we get started and dive in, I'd like to remind our viewers that we take questions after or during the session by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please only use the Q&A button, not the chat feature. Q&A is where we will pull questions from. We'll get to those at the end of this hour. So let's get back to it. Back over to you, Julia.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, share my slides, and we will dive right into this. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you might be in the world. I'm really excited to be here with all of you to share what Nielsen insights into sustainability mean for your brand and your growth and success into the future. So you should be able to see my slides, and I'll dive right in here with actually a look at the past. And a look at how corporate sustainability and responsibility has evolved to get us to where we are today through two lenses, and that's transparency and innovation. So first on transparency, when you think about the growth in environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, reporting requirements and expectations for companies, it's really staggering to think that before 2013, only 20% of the S&P 500 published ESG reports. And today that number is more than 80% and growing fast. And as someone who is responsible for producing our own sustainability reporting at Nielsen as well, I can understand both the opportunity for companies in terms of publishing this, and it's hard to imagine a world without sustainability reporting. Next, on innovation. When we looked at an early 2000s 10-year look at what products were tested through our Nielsen innovation or BASIS practice, we found that a really small number, only 5% of all products, tested for sustainability benefits. And so that means that companies really weren't thinking about what sustainability meant to their consumers, and they weren't thinking so much about how they could use it as a way to win with their consumers. Today, more than 65% of sales represent brands using sustainable marketing or building sustainability into their products in different ways. And that's a huge growth in the recent past when you think about what companies are prioritizing and really thinking about proactively when it comes to growing their brands and their overall product portfolios. So just on these two lenses of innovation and transparency, we've seen huge growth in corporate sustainability and responsibility. And I think when we look back 10 years from today, so in 2029, we'll only see continued growth and acceleration on these two fronts and so many others as well, which we'll get into today in this webinar. So in terms of what the opportunity is, I don't think I need to sell this group on the fact that sustainability represents a huge opportunities for brands to win with consumers. You're here on this webinar because you have already bought into that idea, at least at some level. Perhaps your brands and companies are actively engaging in innovative ways in this space and you're realizing gains. But first, the numbers, and let's talk about that. So for Nielsen, looking at what consumers watch, buy, read, consume across all channels and things at our fingertips, we project that by 2021, the market for sustainable goods and services will grow to 150 billion, and that's billion with a B. That represents about a quarter of growth, so it's a really big slice of the overall pie. And it's not just that people are expected and continue to accelerate their adoption and purchasing of sustainable products, but it's that they also tell us that they're willing to change their consumption habits to make a positive impact on the environment, which to me, going back to innovation, really underlines the example or underlines the point for brands that this is an innovation opportunity, that you can think about new ways to help make your consumers' lives better, to help answer the call to give them products that will reduce their footprint, that'll make it easier for them to live out their preferences and values in the world. So I don't think the case that I need to make today is that sustainability matters, but I do think I need to make a case that's slightly more nuanced, but I think also important, and that is that sustainability needs to be more connected into all parts of your brand strategy and all parts of the way that you view growth and success opportunities for your company, and far more connected and embedded than perhaps it is today. So take a moment just to think to yourself and give your company an assessment. So whether you're on your sustainability team or not, think about where, when, how, who is bringing sustainability to the table in your conversations about pricing optimization or your product mix or your go-to-market strategy or marketing or what have you. Who is bringing sustainability into the conversation? How is it showing up? And when and where is it discussed? Is it discussed sort of at the last stage before something goes out to consumers, or is it part of the strategy from the get-go? So really think about this as a journey and one that we're all on together. And so today what I want to share with you is a set of strategic tips and action steps that you can take back to your companies to help you really embed sustainability into your strategy and make sure that it's authentic in the way that it comes through for your consumers. So I'm on this journey with all of you as well. I'm on our global responsibility and sustainability team at Nielsen, which is responsible for our own corporate responsibility and sustainability footprint writ large in terms of what we do to give data back to nonprofits and communities in our priority cause areas through responsible management of our own environmental resources, through our own ESG reporting, but also in connecting sustainability with our clients and with industries that you all are all in and beyond to really help everybody see the benefit that sustainability brings and opportunities ahead for everybody. So let's start with the first action step. And really with thinking about data and access to data for decision making, let's start there. So the number one thing, and I'll borrow a line from Hamilton here, is that you've got to be in the room where it happens. And so that room has a lot of data in it. So your colleagues on the finance, R&D, marketing, operations, and so on teams are all speaking a certain language or lingo. And it's imperative that if you are that sustainability person, or if you're touching sustainability in some way, that you're able to speak that language and that lingo, but put a sustainability lens on it and pull that out through your everyday analytics, whatever that might be for your company in terms of the metrics and measures that you're using to understand and gauge your success. So, if your marketing team is focused on how to reach a new consumer segment, for example, how could you leverage what you might know about those consumers' needs and wants from a sustainability point of view to help you win in the market? Or if you're a consumer packaged goods company and you've got a great product that helps consumers use less water, how can you maybe bring that benefit to your operational footprint in other ways, and bring that benefit to other products in your portfolio, and maybe connect with those consumers who care about sustainability in other categories as well. So think about what those everyday analytics are for you and how you can put a sustainability lens on those opportunities across your teams. And so for each of these different strategic points, I'm going to bring in data because I'm from Nielsen. So I'm going to bring in some data to help give you examples of really how this strategy can come to life, and hopefully some things that you can take right back to your teams and spark some conversations and opportunities for you all today. So overall sales is a great place to start in terms of understanding sustainability as a competitive differentiator. So this slide shows the overall growth in sustainable food and beverage products in 2018, and it comes from Nielsen Product Insider, which is powered by our partners at Label Insight, and goes beyond marketing claims on packaging to really bring in that detailed ingredient and product characteristics view that can really pinpoint those specific factors driving growth in different categories and with different consumer segments. So Nielsen Product Insider has data on more than 450,000 products and tons of different attributes. So it's a great place that I like to start to understand sort of what does that landscape look like today. So moving through this pyramid approach that we've got here and what we use to identify what clean label and sustainable mean to consumers, it's clear that sustainable products really are winning the day when compared to their non-sustainable competitors. So conventional products without any sort of clean label or sustainable attributes saw very little growth in 2018, whereas all clean label and sustainable products on our hierarchy saw at least some or significant growth. So as you move through the ladder, you go from products without artificial ingredients to products that are clean, meaning that they have the no artificial requirements, plus in addition contain none of the ingredients on our no-no list, like high fructose corn syrup. And then building up to the next category, simple fewer than 10, these products meet those clean requirements, plus have fewer than 10 ingredients, all of which are simple or recognizable to consumers. And then in that last category, sustainability or sustainable, with the highest growth rate in 2018 at almost 6%. These meet all of the no artificial, clean, simple fewer than 10 requirements, plus have a sustainability attribute on top of all the rest, and we'll go into that on the next slide. But in case there were any lingering doubts from anybody on the phone, yes, sustainability does sell, and we've got the proof in the purchase data. So what does sustainability mean to consumers, and where is this showing up? So truly, sustainability sells across a wide spectrum today in terms of what the word sustainability means for consumers. And it's really encompassed, a lot is encompassed in that umbrella term. Maybe 5 or 10 years ago, consumers, when they heard sustainability, or people in general, when they heard sustainability, might have just thought about sort of the green elements, environmental responsibility, recycling, plastic waste, things of that nature. Today, when you hear sustainability, it's true for companies and they're managing their own footprint and their own operations and practices and so on, but also true in the consumer view and the societal view. Sustainability encompasses way more. So really across that environmental, social, and governance spectrum, sustainability is that big, broad umbrella term, and everything from social responsibility of companies in terms of how they treat their employees, how they act as corporate citizens in their communities, through to that environmental element that still remains key and encompassing all kinds of other issues as well. So I think we saw this spectrum come to life in actually a really interesting way at this year's Super Bowl, which is not necessarily a place that I expect to see sustainability show up. But it felt like every beer commercial that I saw that night had something to say about sustainability or some kind of sustainability element that was brought to life in the marketing. And so whether it was sidelining corn syrup as an ingredient, highlighting the use of wind power, highlighting the USDA organic seal, every beer commercial that I saw, and I counted 3 that I definitely caught, highlighted sustainability in their marketing to their consumers. And so I found that to be really interesting, not just because it's some of the most expensive airtime that a brand can buy, but also because they highlighted so many different aspects of sustainability. Again, it wasn't just one element, but it was a wide range of different attributes that all fall within that sustainability umbrella. And so not all claims within these larger buckets here, as you can see, are up across the board. According to this data here, looking backwards at 2018, ending in March of this year, claims related to fair wages, for example, as well as less packaging are both down 4% and 8% respectively. But you've also got some subclaims like B Corporation, that's up 14% within social responsibility, and sustainable fishing, up 27%, that are really making an outsized impact within their category. And again, this data doesn't just look at the claims that a company or brand is making on a package, but also all of the ingredients and certifications that go into a product, so that we're making sure that we're seeing the full picture. And we're not just looking at what's explicitly or directly marketed to a consumer, but really what's part of the product inherently itself. You might notice that there are some overall categories like social responsibility that are down or that are lower values than some of the individual subclaims within them, like social responsibility up 8%, but B Corporation is up 14%. And that's because these are averages of these various subclaims within these, and not all of them fit on the slide, but there's a lot more that goes into each one. Something that I love about sustainability is, we talked about it before, but the opportunity for innovation is endless. And it's something that I think is really exciting for brands. So, these 3 categories, and ice cream is not one that I think of sustainability so readily, but these 3 categories really show the power of how claims and ingredients can redefine the perception that consumers have about a product. So if you take ice cream as an example, in a category that was once struggling to bring in new buyers, where growth was stagnant, brands changed their focus to highlight the backing of the FDA. So ice cream is not the place that I think about going to for my protein count for the day, but shifting the way that consumers viewed ice cream and focusing on that FDA protein aspect really drove customers to ice cream as a category in a really new and powerful way. And ready to drink coffee. It's products that are cold pressed and meet the FDA good source of protein and all natural ingredients that are aligning with shoppers' needs. And then in facial cleansers, this isn't something that just stops at food and beverage with consumers, but facial cleansers, the combination of cruelty-free and all natural, is a winning pair there as well. And that's an interesting one in getting into what it means to be healthy for me and healthy for we, which is something that I'll go into shortly. And something that I'll just pause here and go back to my initial question at the beginning in terms of giving you some thought starters or things to think about as we go along. So really, thinking about where you are as a team, where you are as a company in integrating sustainability, how are you connecting those dots? Is it something that you are proactively putting on the agenda? Is it something that teams are connecting on to look at new opportunities together and really think about the expertise that different teams bring? So the marketing team might have one view of consumers, the product team might have another. How can you sort of compare notes and see what the sustainability highlights might be across to find new opportunities that perhaps were there all along, but can be realized through sustainability in new ways. Really important point here, and that is that where and how sustainability matters the most is really not uniform. So you've got to take a granular look at what sustainability means in particular categories and what sustainability means in different markets and different consumer segments as well. But let's just take a look. If you look at fair trade across these different product categories here, you can get a sense of what I mean. So if I was an analyst at a consumer packaged goods company, and maybe I was thinking about in our food and beverage or beyond categories and product portfolio, and I'm looking at fair trade and the growth of fair trade and consumers talking about it and gravitating towards it. Maybe I would think that it's something to apply across the board without regard to the different category types, and putting aside, of course, the need to make sure that this is authentically connected into your operations and supply chain and all the rest, but just thinking about the category view. So if you look at fair trade for nutrition bars, coconut water, and supplements, you see a really similar story in that it might, fair trade makes up a small size of the category share in each one of these, but it's an outsized growth driver for these categories. So nutrition bars up 28%, fair trade products are up 28% compared to overall category declining 1%. Coconut water, fair trade is up 32% compared to overall category declining 5%. The same story in supplements, but if I carry that thinking over to ice cream, I find that I was wrong in assuming that fair trade would be the right investment to make in ice cream, because as we already talked about, FDA, good source of protein, and other factors contributed to growth and consumer uptake in ice cream, but fair trade wouldn't be that driver for ice cream here. Fair trade ice cream products are up 1% in sales compared to an overall category growth of 3%. So it really might not be that smart bet if I'm looking for sort of the sustainability investment to make in operations, ingredients, products, you name it, and make sure that it's right for that category. So I share that example just to highlight, of course, the importance of innovation and making sure that it's clear that it's not always the same across different categories, and the same is true, of course, in different geographies, markets, consumer types. So it's key to really get those tailored insights for your brand, your market, and so on. And I'd like to talk about transparency a bit here, because I think this is a really important one, and sustainability and transparency sort of go hand in hand, because ensuring that consumers know both how a product is made and what's in and not in a product is really key. So from our global consumer sustainability survey, we know that for a majority of consumers around the world, the absence of certain ingredients is more important to them than the inclusion of other ingredients. So really thinking about acceptable ingredients, no artificial ingredients, that sort of stuff is really key for consumers. And highlighting, all natural, no artificial, that's something that continues to resonate as well. So from our e-commerce sales data, we know too that health and beauty products really blazing the trail for overall consumer packaged goods e-commerce sale. So thinking about that and thinking about these sort of sustainability claims that really work in these different categories, and for personal care here specifically, you can really think about ways to drive engagement in e-commerce as well as in brick and mortar with consumers who care about sustainability. And we know too that consumers with a lifestyle of health and sustainability are more likely to be online shoppers. So it's a great way for you to connect authentically with those consumers there as well. So let's close with one more action point in this first piece of the strategy in terms of viewing sustainability opportunities through your everyday analytics. And I'll close here with a specific example for household care. So this is meant to be an example of the sort of insights that you could take back to your teams if you are a sustainability team at a company with household care products. So, thinking about things like how do the existing product attributes across your brands map to top drivers and top growing claims and attributes? Are you employing the ones that really matter to consumers? How are you making sure that these are built in to your product strategy, your growth strategy? How are you making sure that you're connecting this back to the teams that actually have to make sure that paraben-free and plant-based and B Corporation claims are all true and authentic? How are you connecting it not just for what consumers can readily see on a package or in a product, but making sure it's really a part of your foundational company strategy enterprise-wide and through your value chain? It's really key to sort of see these conversations early so that you're not caught falling behind your competitors because you haven't invested in some of these key sustainability opportunities early enough. And I'd love to hear in the Q&A if folks are adding questions or later, any examples that you all might have too of how you've used insights or you've thought about sustainability to find creative opportunities with your brands as well. So let's move on to the second strategic point that I'd like to share with you all today, and that is to sort of zoom out in order to zoom in. So there's some forces of change that are affecting all of us today, all of us in the world as people, as companies, as consumers. And those are really, government action in terms of laws and regulations, grassroots consumer demand, and corporate involvement and corporate engagement, and companies that are really thinking about where they can take a leadership position on sustainability issues that make sense for their companies and really matter for their consumers. So maybe one of those leadership positions, given the nature of your business, could be waste and packaging waste or plastic waste or different ways of thinking about that. And certainly if you're a retailer or you're a consumer packaged goods company, consumers increasingly expect brands to help them deal with sort of that headache of what recycling and reuse or circular economy, what that could mean for them and their communities. And so here again, you could take action on this cross-functionally within your company and share these sorts of insights with various teams to figure out what makes sense for your company and what might resonate most strongly with your consumers. So our latest data, for example, shows here that for pizza buyers, they're looking for products with recycled packaging, and recyclable packaging is really resonating with beverage consumers. So if you can use the power of consumer and sales insights to help you and your teams find new opportunities to win, you'll be invited back to that table. And the more you can create those winning opportunities, sustainability will be put on the agenda as a really natural, in a really natural way, rather than sort of as a perhaps a forced conversation that sometimes is what we hear happening at manufacturers or retailers that haven't fully realized the opportunity that sustainability presents for their brands quite yet. So I'd like to give you some more kind of data that might be useful to you in terms of understanding this bigger picture and beyond which sustainability attributes are outperforming across that spectrum of sustainability that we talked about earlier. Another really important thing to understand is sort of who is this sustainability shopper and some of the demographic and psychographic information that can get really interesting when you're able to drill down into your specific company, industry, product category, you name it. And so while it's a pretty even split across men and women, according to our data, it's perhaps no surprise to the millennials, and Mark already mentioned it, but millennials really care about sustainability in terms of the relative importance across generations. But that being said, really the majority of consumers globally across all generations say that sustainability matters. So thinking about perhaps are there different groups within these sets that you haven't yet connected with as deeply or authentically as you'd like, and how could you use sustainability as a lever to do that? And so this is where the power of Nielsen comes in terms of connecting what people say and say they feel and what they actually do. So again, on that topic of sort of who is the sustainable shopper beyond the demographic information, and beyond sort of the broad understanding of things like we all sort of want to manage our carbon footprint responsibly. We all want to feel healthy. We all want to feel like we're doing the right thing by our communities. Not everybody that has these feelings are driving the purchasing behavior. So you really want to drill down into the specifics of the consumers of your particular brand or category or in the markets that you're looking at. So, what's their family makeup? Where do they live? What are their priorities, habits, hobbies, interests? How can you use that to better understand that holistic picture of their life and help create products and services and environments that will really help them and plug into their preferences and their values in a really authentic way. So probably also not a surprise to folks in the room, but we find that folks living on the coast, at least in the United States is one example, folks on the coast in cities like Boston, San Francisco, New York have the highest household penetration with sustainable products, but we see that interest and engagement really growing and moving into other cities, places like Cincinnati, my hometown, St. Louis, Chicago, and others in terms of households that are purchasing these products and dollar growth attached to that as well. And if you take a closer look at the households that make up these different shoppers, it presents a great opportunity to expand like who ultimately cares about sustainability. Thinking about startup families, smaller households, young transitionals. I know GMDC has a self-care summit coming up. And you can think about perhaps the concerns of these different groups through that sustainability lens, whether you're perhaps an older couple that's looking to use food as a way to address different health concerns in addition to, traditional medical care, or you're a startup family wanting to, make food and have products in your home that are good for your young children. Thinking about what that means, what care and what priorities mean to your consumers can really help you create that overall strategy that'll help you win. And sustainability is a big piece of that. And of course, keeping in trend with the data, I wanted to also share a look at, the top countries where consumers are really demanding sustainability. And it's a close race here. A lot of, again, as we've been talking about, this is a global issue. This is no longer sort of a niche topic of concern, but India, Colombia, and Mexico lead the way in terms of countries around the world where consumers are really demanding this. And something that, is relevant for all of us to be thinking about, depending on where we have operations or where we're engaging with consumers, are, what are those local, regional issues that really matter to consumers when it comes to sustainability? What are the things that they're dealing with every day, whether it's water scarcity, recycling infrastructure that isn't working, what have you. How can you also take action as a company to help address any of those real-time concerns that your consumers have as people living in this shared earth? So let's move on here to the next strategic point, which is really kind of, again, zooming in on those factors and forces of change that are affecting all of us, but taking a step further and really thinking about what's truly unique about your brand and how can you help your consumers live a healthy for me and healthy for we lifestyle. I mentioned this before, and I want to go back to it here in more detail because I think it's really relevant for all of us. And again, with that self-care summit coming up with GMDC, I think something interesting to take to that as well. So when you think about the factors that influence consumer purchase behavior, of course, traditional factors like convenience, awareness, budget, ability to spend, these are things that will always affect consumer decision-making. But we're finding increasingly that consumers are really focused on this idea of wanting to buy products that are both healthy for me, for my family, and healthy for we or for the world. And so how can you, as a brand, uniquely meet consumers in that place and help them live out their expectations? So I've got an example that I love, and I tell this story often, but I think it really encapsulates what healthy for me and healthy for we means. One of my Nielsen Innovation colleagues was shopping with her 6-year-old daughter, and they were shopping for eggs in their local grocery store. And while my colleague is scanning the aisle for the brand of organic eggs that she prefers because she thinks that those are the right eggs for her family and her own personal health and well-being, her daughter is also scanning the aisle, her 6-year-old, and she is putting a healthy for we lens on her shopping. And she asked her mom if they could buy the kind of chickens, or they could buy the kind of eggs where the chickens get to play. So her daughter, her 6-year-old, was thinking about buying eggs where the chickens get to play. And that brings in all kinds of different sort of sustainability product attributes that you can think about there that would help illuminate that. But I love that example because they found the eggs that would meet both the healthy for me and the healthy for we criteria. So it's a very complementary decision factor, but it's something that is really powerful when you think about that one shopping cart for that one family. If they ask those questions for each purchasing decision that they made about each specific item, and then you really multiply that out by all of the families in that store, all of the families in that city, and so on. You get the point. So I think it's a really sort of powerful example when you think about that at scale, and you think about how complementary that conversation can be. It's no longer something where you have to choose. It's either good for me and my family, or it's good for my community, environment, broader world. You can find products, and brands are really repositioning themselves to make sure that they're able to deliver to consumers on this healthy for me and healthy for we promise. So the good news for healthy for me and healthy for we brands and products is that these are linked to premium factors. So consumers around the world tell us that they're willing to pay more for these products that meet a broad range of different sustainability criteria. So whether it's products with high safety standards, products that use all natural ingredients, environmentally friendly, deliver on a social responsibility claim or cause that matters to them. Consumers are really focused on voting with their wallets and going for products that help them live out that healthy for me and healthy for we lifestyle. I'd invite you too to think about what this means in your own purchasing behavior. So everybody has sort of probably an overall frame that you use to think about your own purchasing habits for yourself, your family, what have you. And you probably have a different way of thinking about it depending on the category. So for me, for example, I focus on organic when I'm shopping for produce. But when my husband and I went last weekend to shop for a new mattress, I wasn't looking for organic. I was thinking about what are the materials used in that mattress? Is there anywhere that I can tell if they're environmentally friendly or not? So you've got different lenses, but all that can fit and coexist in harmony, if you will, in this healthy for me and healthy for we understanding. So I want to pull out one specific example that I think might be helpful to sort of bring this to life. And we're seeing a ton of growth in a ton of different places and consumer contexts when it comes to healthy for me and healthy for we. But I think waste as an issue in our world, and plastic waste in particular, is something that is relevant to think about here, just given the increasing conversation that we have as a society around this and around what consumers individually can do and what companies need to do to take action on this. So Loop is one example, if you're familiar with it, of this healthy for me, healthy for we brought to life in terms of sort of creating this milkman model of delivering consumers their products in packaging that's reusable, refillable. And so I think an interesting example, it's yet to fully launch, but an interesting sort of thought starter to think about how you can create new opportunities at the intersection of healthy for me and healthy for we that expand the pie for everybody. So this is a win for consumers, a win for brands, and also a win for retailers in terms of retailers that are part of that Loop system. So it's just one example of the ways that you can think about, where are there opportunities through sustainability to expand the pie and expand what's possible, not just for your own company, but for perhaps your industry more broadly as well. And so when you think about how you could expand that definition of what's possible for your industry or your company, think about what your consumers are telling you in terms of what they're looking for from the brands that they support and how they're changing their habits today and willing to change those habits into the future. So this data comes from a study that we did recently of consumers in Ireland, and I share it just sort of as a directional insight to give you a sense of what I mean by consumer insights into sort of habits and preferences and how consumers are shifting their views. So consumers are gravitating towards minimal packaging, recyclable, even no packaging in cases. So really the question for all of you to think about is, how could you sort of tailor this to your own brands or companies? Where could you bring in some of these consumer insights to understand what you might do today to invest in sustainability and help accelerate your growth in terms of engagement with your consumers? And what's that additional layer of insight that you might need for different markets or consumer demographics or types of products in your portfolio that would be relevant for you to understand in order to make the right decision when it comes to investing in sustainability as well? And these questions are really important because going back to an earlier point too, retailers and manufacturers are increasingly expected to take action, and consumers are really holding them to account in terms of what they're expected to do and where consumers might give fault to a retailer, manufacturer, other corporate actor in some of these sustainability conversations. And so you think about things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as one sort of example of how we as a society have a shared understanding or a shared view of sort of these collective issues or problems that we're all meant to address together. We've had the SDGs for longer than this most recent version, or we had another iteration of them before, but I think it's an interesting case study to look at too in terms of the greater uptick in conversation around adoption of the SDGs and real tangible concrete action, just as a way to think about again, that sort of governmental and corporate action that's expected, and that's being fueled in part by grassroots consumer and human societal demand and need. So I'd like to share some live examples of how some of these sort of collective action expectations for companies and retailers and manufacturers in particular come to life. So perhaps some of you are familiar with these, but this is just coming from desk research of what's happening in the world and some interesting examples of some of these concepts brought to life. So this is a German supermarket that actually teaches consumers through their shopping at the store to reduce, reuse, and recycle. We've got a Dutch supermarket here that has a plastic-free aisle. So that's a really interesting way of sort of guiding consumers to think about sustainability and naturally provide a way for them to gravitate towards that if that's what they're looking for when in store. We've got a zero-waste grocery store in Singapore with consumers using self-serving bins and bringing their own containers. So no longer is it just bring your own tote bag and skip the bags at the end of your purchase, but bring your own containers to fill up in the store. And then on the manufacturer front, we see a ton of manufacturers aligning to this global trend of really big goals, both in terms of their own kind of corporate footprints and what they're doing to help consumers in their own lives, in their own homes as well. So this is just a sampling of some global manufacturers. I'm sure you're familiar with these and many more, but just again to highlight the point that this is something that manufacturers, retailers, other companies, other industries are really taking seriously and really building into their strategies and what they do on a day-to-day basis in an authentic way. And this last example is one I love just as a creative way through marketing to help educate consumers and encourage them, in this case, to recycle. So this olive brand, put expiration dates individually on the different parts of the product. So not just the olives that you're going to buy to eat, but also the lid, the label, and really breaking down what the expiration date is for each of those. And I think in a really unique way, educating consumers about their choices and perhaps encouraging consumers to think through their purchasing and the brands that they support and the way that they buy their products as well in a really interesting way. So I love this example for that. So again, getting back to some action points, and I want to give you, like I said, some things that you can take back to your teams really as thought starters of sort of the type of insights that you can use or could be helpful to your company. But again, consumers don't just tell us that they're willing to change their consumption habits and that they're willing to pay more for brands that help them live out their healthy for me and healthy for we lifestyle, but it's really also showing up in their purchasing behavior. So, for example, brands with claims about ethical business practices have seen sales growth of 7% compared to a year ago. And B Corporation claims are really driving growth when it comes to eggs and cheese, as another example. So think about these sorts of insights really directionally in terms of how your sustainability platform could help your brand here. And what could you bring to the forefront in your consumer engagement strategy that perhaps you're already doing or perhaps is already a part of your brand or company today, but isn't being shared explicitly? Or, are there things that you really need to invest in today to be able to claim that eventually on a package because you know that consumers of your particular product category really care about some sustainability aspect that you might not be prioritizing or putting into action today quite yet. And that gets to the fourth and very important strategic point, and that's to make sure that you have this as part of your full end-to-end value chain. And really, in order for this to be authentic, it's got to show up in the way that you operate on a day-to-day basis. It has to show up in your supply chain. It has to show up in your products in terms of their ingredients and packaging and all sorts of other things too. So make sure that again, this is part of ongoing regular conversations across your different teams so that sustainability is part of that truly and authentically. And then you'll be able to reap the rewards of sustainability in terms of more authentically connecting with consumers who increasingly care about these various aspects. And like I said before, sustainable shoppers are digitally engaged. So if you're thinking about the business case for why that you should make sure that sustainability is truly authentically embedded across your entire value chain, it's really that consumers aren't just shopping online more or more comfortable with e-commerce or different sort of channels of shopping or engaging with you, but they're also fact checkers. And consumers are not just comparing products on traditional attributes, but they're also fact checking your claims and making sure that you are operating responsibly, and maybe they're triangulating with different sources, whether it's your corporate website or other websites they use, or maybe they read an article about one of your factories somewhere, and they're really bringing that into their purchasing behavior. So you want to make sure that you're using digital channels as a way to really authentically engage with your consumers and bring them along on your product and corporate journey, but you're also not leaving yourself exposed if you're not being truly authentic with the way that sustainability comes to life for your company across all of these different really important aspects. So here's an example of where the data can help you bring that into action or take action on that. So for example, renewable energy, water conservation, carbon footprint, these are all aspects that are really growing in terms of what consumers are gravitating towards for different product and purchasing decisions that they're making. And so the relevance here is that, something like renewable energy, if you are the sustainability team at your company, you know what it takes to flip the switch on renewable energy, and you know that it perhaps isn't something that is done in a day. Or water conservation. A lot of manufacturers are taking really authentic, great action on addressing issues of water scarcity or water depletion, and that's awesome. But again, it's something that Rome was not built in a day, so you want to make sure that you're really engaging with your teams thoughtfully about what goes into all of these different things, and making sure that you're making those corporate investments or those sort of behind the scenes investments that might not always be visible to your consumers, might not always be immediately part of your strategy or part of what you're talking about with consumers. But again, investments made today in the right direction will help you realize those gains into the future, because you'll be able to authentically share that with consumers and make it a part of your strategy. So these are the sorts of insights that you could take to your teams and really use to show the ROI for making an investment in a sort of sustainability milestone, like going for renewable energy or any other sort of goal that you might have in mind, but perhaps aren't able to push over the finish line without data that ties back to your consumers. So the last strategic point that I'll leave you is really a summation of what we've been talking about this whole time. And again, authenticity. If I had to boil all of this down to sort of one word, it's authenticity. And you've got to make sure that this is showing up across your strategy, across your brand messaging and your product messaging, across the way that consumers are engaging with you online and in store, or in so many different touch points that they have today with you. And a really key thing to remember is that this is something that should evolve over time. So this is not meant to be static and something that you sort of check off the list and then you're done. But really, as these forces of change continue to guide us all forward, you want to be thinking about how you can evolve this in real time and continually check in with your consumers and with what's happening in the market in your industry to make sure that you're going in the right direction. So the last bit that I'll leave you with, and this should be a familiar slide, but I purposely added it here again, just to underscore the sort of optimistic note of opportunity that we all have when it comes to sustainability. So it truly expands the pie of what's possible for every brand, category, and company, as we really all seek to meet the evolving needs of consumers, as consumers grow more sophisticated, and innovations and new products are needed to help them meet their lifestyle expectations and help us create a more sustainable planet and world for all of us to live in. So whether you're a retailer wondering how to organize your online and in-store shopping experience around sustainability, or you're a manufacturer looking to understand really what matters most to your consumers, there's no shortage of opportunity for you to bring sustainability into your growth strategy. And remember, it's really important to take your seat at the table and make sure that sustainability is seen as the growth opportunity that it should be for your company and brand. And tailored insights for your company, for your brand, for your industry really go a long way in helping you make the case for that and helping you really bring sustainability to life for your company, because this isn't about just getting ahead of your competition. It's about keeping pace with your consumers in a really rapidly changing and evolving world. So another headline I'd like to leave you with and make sure landed with everybody is that, yes, sustainability truly does sell, but how and where and what, and it's up to you to translate exactly what that means for your brand in a unique way. So I wish you all the best, because you are all shaping that future for all of us as consumers and as people in terms of the products that we buy and the way that we buy them. So I wish you all the best, and Nielsen is here to help with that data and the measurement insights that we can provide however we can. And I look forward to questions in the Q&A and hearing more from all of you. So thank you so much for the time.
Thanks again, Julia, for hosting this Infocast, and we appreciate your partnership with GMDC and our Education Leadership Council.
Sure, happy to.
We do have a few questions, and I'd like to get to them. The first question is actually coming from Hope, and it's two parts. Hope, I do want you to know that the Self-Care Summit is October 3 to 7 in Indianapolis at the JW Marriott, and we have two different areas of our Self-Care Summit that are buying and selling, as well as our learning track attendees can really glean opportunities from. Our buying and selling aspect of our 5-day event really comes where retailers, suppliers, and service solution companies come together and really meet face-to-face in various different networking events, as well as tabletop meetings, even private hotel suites. So we'd be happy to send you a link and more information on that and get your company involved. Julia, Hope is also asking you a question. She says, interesting that clean labeling is considered as sustainable claims. Could you elaborate more on that connected?
Yeah, sure. And I can go back to my screen share just so everybody can see that. But it's something that is sort of part of that hierarchy. So it's tough to maybe land on one definition of what sustainable means for one product or even holistically overall. So we've created this sort of hierarchy view to show the different sort of tiers or levels around what sustainability means. And so the connection between clean and sustainable is really thinking again to that point of consumers focusing on the absence of ingredients that they're looking to avoid. When you think about the different ingredient formulations that might not be the best for consumers' health, they also have impacts on our environment and our world in terms of what happens to those products once they're done with the consumer. So there's a lot of different sort of interconnections there between clean and sustainable, but I think a good way to think about this is really sort of that hierarchy view or the tiered view of the sort of the different levels that sustainability can take in different products themselves or in different categories overall in terms of truly what it means to be sustainable or clean, as that varies across the board.
Thanks, Julia. Veronique is asking, does Nielsen also have information on the best way to communicate sustainable initiatives taken by a company to consumers, such as packaging, media, digital? What are some of the best practices? And as we say here in GMDC, most importantly, what are the next practices? Because as you mentioned, that it's not just about following the competition, it's following the consumer. And as we look at follow the consumer, we always have to be in a mindset of what's next. Where's the puck going? Do you have any practices or suggestions on that, or does Nielsen offer more information in regards to what's important from a consumer's point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some insights going out on our Nielsen, our Nielsen Insights Thought Leadership page soon, talking about or showcasing some recent research that we've got looking at the sustainability attributes that matter most to consumers and how that shows up in their purchasing behavior and how they view companies that are communicating about those things. Two Nielsen services that come to mind in terms of helping to answer those sorts of questions. One would be our Nielsen innovation team, and they do all sorts of really cool work that gets me excited about with consumers, directly understanding with them how they're reacting to product packaging, product characteristics, how a product is formulated, how a product is communicated about by a brand, sort of helping understand those more emotional touch points with consumers, where consumers' interest or engagement is dropping off, where it's peaking, how to communicate that message in the most resonant way with consumers. Nielsen Neuro is also a really cool place to look for that. We've got some interesting case studies on our website about that, but there are some great things to think about in terms of how you share this story through media to the question. So Nielsen Neuro does a lot of great work to understand where consumer attention points are dropping off, or where consumers are most emotionally connected or engaged with the brand story or a product story. So I think looking at how you can get that sort of granular insights or tailored insights, as I said, for your brand is really important. So how are consumers not just reacting to whatever broad sustainability claim or topic that you might be interested in, but how are they reacting to the way that your brand, your company is talking about it? Does that resonate? Does it feel authentic? Is there a different way to sort of phrase it or word it to make sure that it lands with consumers? So I would look at Nielsen Innovation, Nielsen Neuro for more on that, and happy to share that with you, Mark, for your membership.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. That is a great answer. I'd like to, do part 2 of that answer for Veronique. We have GMDC members have access to all of our retail white papers that we publish. So Nielsen is a strategic partner of us. They actually also sit on GMDC's board of directors. But in addition to that, we offer inside our content library a series of white papers that offers retail point of views. So as Nielsen works with us on consumer points of views, we're directed by a retail focus group, our education council here inside the association, that provides insights on that from a slightly different point of view as well. So I'd be happy to walk you through that so that you have access to some of those insights and best practices, as well as health and wellness trends, as well as what we're seeing in the sustainability space as well. Julia, next question. Timothy is asking, there was a slide that showed the importance of sustainability by country. Is there a way to see that globally?
Yeah, we don't have, we've got, I think, a few more countries that we share on our website in terms of the report. And it went out late last year with this view. In terms of the full kind of global country set, we've got that for our clients who are interested in seeing that. So best answer to that is reach out to your Nielsen client business partner to see the full global view. And if you don't have one, you could reach out to me and I can help. But yeah, this is just sort of what we've shared from a thought leadership perspective with the public, but there's more for Nielsen clients as well.
One more question. Madeline is asking, what is the trade-off between sustainability and price? Can it be one or the other, or can they coexist?
Yeah, it's a really great and interesting question. It's something that we in the past have viewed as maybe perhaps more of a trade-off. And something where maybe consumers weren't willing to pay more for sustainable products, or they viewed sustainability as something that brought a product into a sort of higher end category. But I would say that today they can really coexist and coexist nicely. And I would say that's where tools like Nielsen Innovation can be helpful in terms of understanding what that point is at which consumers are no longer comfortable paying more. So I think really testing that with your consumer set in terms of where that line is important. But as a general statement, they can coexist, and consumers do tell us that they're willing to pay more, and we see that show up in the purchase data that we've got. So I would encourage companies to really think about, what are those investments they need to make in sustainability to be authentic? Do you need to increase prices in order to do that? And consumers are more willing than ever before to, assume that, a greater price increase is to be part of that story, be part of that positive impact. So I would encourage you to really explore that and what that could mean for your consumer sets as well.
Julia, thanks again for being on the line today. We appreciate it. We appreciate everything that Nielsen does inside our ecosystem, and look forward to some future Infocast with you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, and thanks to the whole community. It was great to be here today.
If this is your first time experiencing a GMDC Infocast, I'd like to make sure that you're aware that this session and all previous sessions can also be viewed in the archive tab on gmdcconnect.org, along with a schedule for future Infocasts. Today's session is recorded and will be available next week if you'd like to come back and watch and share this again. Some of the questions by our viewers today also were very relevant. One of them specifically was about the Self-Care Summit. That's taking place October 3 to 7th in Indianapolis, hosted by Global Market Development Center and Retail Tomorrow. And if you have any questions on that, please go to selfcaresummit.org. Check it out. You'll see the keynote speakers, as well as the listing of our retailers and our suppliers and other opportunities to really be part of that conversation and new consumer movement. I'd like to encourage you to get involved with GMDC and become a member if you're not already. Today's Infocast is just a small sample of what members have access to. GMDC is a business ecosystem that helps you connect and collaborate in both the general merchandise and health and beauty wellness space. For more information, please contact me at markm@gmdc.org. I'd love to help you find opportunities to get you exposed to decision makers that can truly change your business. Thanks again for joining us today, and take care.